Codependency means I'm trying to manipulate the reactions and the presence of someone in my life. One of the ways to look at control being surrendered is if you're doing something for your spouse, what is your motivation for doing it? If it's fear and anxiety of what their reaction will be, that's codependency. If it's surrendered control, you're basically going to do stuff for them out of love and service, not expecting anything in return. So when you surrender control of your spouse, you're basically letting go of trying to manipulate their reactions. That's an incredibly important thing to build trust. In other words, the spouse will perceive he's not trying to fool me, deceive me, manipulate me, and control me. Maybe now I can start trusting him.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. I'm Randy Everett, your co-host, and we'd like to bring a legacy presentation to you today featuring Dr. Mark Laaser, the founder of Faithful and True. Today's episode is on the Healthy Sexuality Series, and today's episode is Relational Dimension Part 2. This has been a series that has been quite well received by our listeners. We hope that you'll enjoy the words of wisdom shared by Dr. Mark Laaser today. Here now is part 2 of Relational Dimension.
Randy, we're going to continue our conversation evidently about the relational dimension. We got into it last week in our show on that unit in the Faithful and True workbook. And we discovered that there's so much material in it that we didn't get all the way through it. So,
well, I noticed in listening back to last week's show, Mark, that you even mentioned it on the show as we got into it. And you said, the more we have jumped into this subject, there's so much more that we really didn't get enough time to discuss. And towards the end of the show, you had gotten into briefly approaching the subject of the contracts.
Right.
The workbook actually mentions 6 independent contracts that are a dimension of the relational unit here, including sexuality, fighting, communication, roles, play, and spirituality. And you touched on the fact that you and Deb used to have a contract for a Friday night date night.
That's kind of a contract about having fun, particularly in our field where there's been, infidelity and so forth. The couples don't think about going out and having fun together. So we found out that it was just really important to take that more intentionally. These contracts are about, I think the key word here is intentionality, not leaving anything to chance or not leaving anything to unspoken expectations for things. Back in those days when we were doing a lot of work with Recovering Couples Anonymous, we found that, for example, one of the contracts that was important in the early stages was teaching couples how to have what we used to call a fair fight. Today we call that a safe conversation contract. And with that, we basically ask the couples to think about ways that they talk, communicate, fight, that make them feel unsafe. And, things come up like yelling, screaming, profanity, blaming, name-calling, things of that nature. Also, things come up about, where it is, like in certain places in the house, in front of the kids, in the car, on the phone. And basically, that contract starts out by having a couple list things that when they happen, they make the couple feel unsafe. And then we turn that around and say, okay, where would a safe conversation happen? When would it happen? Timing is important. A lot of couples, like somebody will bring up something right before someone else has to leave for work, or right before they go to bed, or right before someone else has something important to do. And we've just found that establishing a contract for when this happens is important, and also maybe that it has a time limit, so that maybe a half hour's worth is what you need, and if you don't get something resolved at the end of that half hour, then you decide to take a break, a pause, a timeout, and reschedule the conversation.
I thought it was interesting last week when you threw in the comment about not using the term you so much, and because of the accusatory nature of that?
Well, usually when you start a statement with you, it's generally about some judgment or some kind of blaming place that you're in about what the other person is doing. So we have this thing here, which we should probably cover in another show. It's hard to do without some visualization, but it's our demonstration of the three hoops. Some people out there listening will be familiar with it. But basically, if you're coming from your own hoop, so to speak, it's taking your own inventory, starting with I statements. I believe, my expectation is, my experience is, my woundedness is, my belief, stuff like that, as opposed to you did this, when you do that, that kind of thing. So that's kind of couples communication strategies 101. I mean, you can go to a lot of different workshops at a lot of different places, including some of our churches, and learn how to have safe conversations using I language and active listening. And that could be part of the contract in terms of the how you have the conversation, the when, the where, establishing rules and boundaries for that, timing and so forth. Those are all important parts of the safe conversation contract.
What does the sexuality contract entail?
Well, a lot of our couples, when they have experienced what they do with infidelity, in all its different forms, there's oftentimes a period of sexual abstinence or sexual coming apart, meaning that the violated spouse at that point doesn't really feel like being sexual with someone who has committed infidelity. So there's usually a period of time where one of them is in a separate bedroom, one of them is maybe even out of the house, or they're still in the same bedroom, but the one spouse, the offended spouse, doesn't really feel like being touched even. So at some point in the couple's healing journey, we know that we may have to be intentional to bring sexuality back in. And it may mean, like we had a couple this week that decided after an 11-month in-house separation that the husband was finally going to move back into the bedroom. And moving into the bedroom, they were going to be in the same bed and so forth, but they decided not to bring full-blown genital sexuality back into the picture yet. So maybe in a month, when they feel safe, being in the same bedroom, we will start introducing more overt sexuality. And some of the couples, perhaps even throughout their entire history, have had some level of sexual dysfunction. So a sexuality contract might include a contract to get some professional sex therapy for any kind of sexual dysfunctions that might be present. Basically, one of the things in a sexuality contract is to help distinguish the difference between healthy touch and sexual touch. So a couple may say, or one of the people may say, I'd like to hold your hand with apologies to the Beatles. And that doesn't mean that I want that to lead to being overtly sexual. I want to give you a hug. I want to kiss you. I'm not intending for this to lead to more full-blown sexuality, so that we can distinguish the difference between healthy touch and genital sexuality.
Especially when you take into consideration we're walking through the mall.
Well, thank you, Randy. There might be a contract for no PDA, as we used to call it, public displays of affection.
There's a time and a place for everything.
That's right. Yeah, Debbie and I go back to our high school where the morning announcements every day over the loudspeaker said no neck clutching, waist encircling, or hand holding in the halls. So, it's making everything intentional. It's not leaving anything for granted. It's not leaving expectations unverbalized. A lot of times sexuality is something that we don't talk about. We just kind of feel like it's something we spontaneously get into. So this can include a lot of different things. This again could be, like so many of our topics, the subject of an entire show.
Exactly.
That kind of contract.
I was intrigued by the contract that deals with roles. Tell us a little bit. What does that entail?
Well, a role contract has to do with how we were raised in terms of the modeling that we had about gender. So that in my family, pretty classic greatest generation stuff, meaning my parents were the greatest generation. So the husband goes outside the home, works, produces the income. the wife stays home, raises the family, does the domestic work of the home. And that's the modeling that we saw. Now, beginning in the 60s and 70s, some of this changed with the women's liberation movement and some, actually very good things that came out of that. So the expectation that a lot of women have today is to be able to work and to be able to share parenting responsibilities. So we just think, again, intentionally, couples need to talk about what their expectations are about that and share responsibilities for the domestic work, the income-producing work, and not leave anything unspoken about that.
And my wife and I have a wonderful divide and conquer type of relationship where I actually have great pride in the job that I do as the laundry guy. And in days gone by, you couldn't fathom the father or the husband being the head laundry provider.
Nor could you fathom, I think, the fact that the woman might go out and actually earn more income than the man.
Oh, without a doubt.
That would have been, that would have had some kind of meaning attached to it for the average man and his ego. I think a lot of this is about ego and pride. But, the healthy couple is going to be able to work at these chores and role descriptions, as a companionship.
Well, last week you touched on the play contract, in which you were saying how you and Debbie had a contract in which every Friday night you had contracted with a babysitter to show up at the house, and whether you were going to use her services that night or not, she knew that she was going to be paid, which really kind of put it on your and Deb's plate to let's schedule something so we can go out and have some fun.
Yeah, and one of the things we discovered there is that even when we were dating, we kind of did conventional things that, what couples at our high school and colleges did. I mean, you went to movies, you went out to eat, you went to parties that were organized by your friends, you went to dances and proms and homecomings and things of that nature. And even when we went to dances, we really didn't know how to dance. So, I mean, it was just kind of swaying to the music back in those days.
Right.
So, these days, Debbie and I have done play that includes going on golf vacations, going to golf school, taking dance lessons, going to concert series, going to plays, other things like that we've had to figure out we really enjoy. And again, what is our key word in this whole contract thing? It's intentionality, trying to figure out what we do to have fun, to play, to laugh together. Even this coming weekend, which is a weekend that we have free before we do some international travel, we decide, we've got a free weekend. What are we going to do to play this weekend? Well, one of the things that's actually can be related to is the sexuality contract, so that if a couple is deciding to be abstinent for a while, which is usually, part of our healing journey for the average addict, to detoxify his brain and reset the expectation levels in the neurochemistry of his brain. So, the average couple in our program is going to go, a period of time where they have mutually agreed, intentionally agreed not to be sexual. But during that time, we also believe that it's important to have a spirituality contract so that they can now intentionally decide to do something that's spiritual in nature, and that might be a variety of things. It could be praying together, studying scripture together, going to a Sunday school class together, going on some spiritual pilgrimage. One of our couples of the Roman Catholic faith was telling us this week that they went on a pilgrimage to a particularly religiously significant place over in Wisconsin, and they spent the whole day there just kind of being with each other, try to understand the importance and meaning of whatever the place represented.
Well, enough about Lambeau Field.
Thank you, Randy. It was, I guess, for some people in Wisconsin, that is a religious experience. But
well, when you said pilgrimage in Wisconsin, I could only imagine the. I've seen the Vince Lombardi image of him dressed as the Pope, and I'm sorry, I tied the two together probably erroneously.
You probably did. I think it had more to do with some cathedral someplace over there, and we're not talking about Lambeau Field.
All right, then we will march on. Does that leave us with anything more that you want to say about the contracts?
Contracts are really just intentional decisions on the part of a couple to be companions and to rather than leave things to chance, leave things untalked about, not voicing and verbalizing expectations. It's basically making a lot of functions in life as a couple more intentional.
All right. That clears that up. The remaining section of this relational dimension is restoring trust.
The 7 things that I think about that are important in helping a couple reestablish trust after there's been some level of infidelity. The first one is to recognize that couples are a oneness. We say with the C there that it's Christ-centered, and it goes back to Paul's teaching in Ephesians 5 and also Jesus talking about the Genesis quote where a man and a woman become one flesh. And then Paul in Ephesians 5 says, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the relationship of Christ to the church. So we just think that when we work with people here, we know that the individuals involved, the husbands, the wives, they both need to be on their own personal healing journey. But if couples are a oneness, the oneness of their relationship is also an identity of and to itself. We were impressed about this when our daughter, Sarah, was getting old enough to be in that social place with friends where they were talking or, sending notes or whatever they were doing. We heard her talking on the phone one night to one of her friends about her parents. It wasn't, mom and dad. It wasn't Mark or Deb. It was her parents. In the minds of some kids, parents are a collective identity. That just reaffirmed for us we're a oneness, we're a one flesh union. And what that basically means in terms of establishing trust is that there's a level of understanding of the spirituality and the covenant of that.
Well, the second of these principles is that healthy trust must be committed.
Committed meaning that if you're going to establish trust back in the relationship, there must be a commitment to pursue the relationship, to stay the course, to not threaten divorce. Later on, much after this was written, Debbie wrote her book for spouses. She called it closing the door, meaning that while we may not have the faith and confidence yet that we can stay married forever, we at least make a decision for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months to not threaten divorce, not talk about divorce, not see lawyers, but to close the door on that idea, to be committed to the relationship.
The third of these being that healthy trust must be continuing.
That's just a reminder that trust is not some overnight thing that all of a sudden happens. One of the things that always amazes me is that when guys come to our workshop, and that's a 3-day experience, now some of them are three days sober, 7 days sober. They go home after the workshop and they basically make statements to their spouse like, you can trust me now. I've been transformed. I've been healed. I've got a new commitment to be sober. Trust is an ongoing developing thing. It's not just about sexual purity, by the way. It's also about one of the other C's that comes up here, and that is consistency. So if trust is continuing, it's ongoing, it's a lifetime journey at this point. We always have to be trustworthy for the rest of our lives. It's just a recognition, I think, particularly on the part of the men struggling with addiction, but also their spouses. But I think sometimes in the church there's an expectation that's been out there that the spouses need to forgive, forget, trust again. The addicts tend to be impatient about that. But I think trust is built when we both know this is going to take a while to feel again.
Well, the fourth principle, the fourth C, if you will, seems to strike me as a key one, and that is that healthy trust must be communicating.
Communicating means that most men struggling with addiction, I'm sure that's true of women also that might struggle with addiction, is that they are chronic liars. They are deceivers. They misrepresent the truth. They do a lot of different kinds of lying. Even if you were to ask them how they're really feeling, they'd say they're feeling fine, which is a lie because they're not feeling fine. So communicating is about telling the truth. Basically, this is about telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I heard a speaker talk about the oath that we take when we testify in a trial. It covers both committing a lie and the omission of truth. Tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And that may also include a period of time of going through what we call full disclosure and telling the entire history of your sexual and immoral activities from birth to the present.
All right. Our next C, you just touched on a moment ago with consistent.
Consistency means that even after the men struggling with addiction get sober from the immoral sexual activities, their behaviors might be inconsistent. They may say, "Oh, well, I'll be home for dinner at 5," and then they show up at 8 because they all of a sudden got distracted at work or, whatever. Well, for the spouse who's struggling with trust, that the husband is a liar, then you could be lying about when you're coming home, or I'll take the kids, I'll pick up so-and-so after school today, and then Joey's standing there all by himself for a couple hours because Dad has forgotten to do it. We actually had that example this past week. So it's learning how to be faithful in all of your activities, to be a man of integrity, a man of valor, the name of our radio show, and be consistent in all of your behaviors.
Your sixth principle here says that healthy trust must be considerate.
Considerate means that, I think particularly in our healing journey from infidelity, it means that we would not expect our spouses to trust us too fast. If they still continue to have pain, heartache, tears, anger, anxiety, that we seek to be patient about that. We seek to be considerate. We're the ones that have created the damage, and we need to allow them time to heal. To expect them to heal too soon, to expect them not to have reactions, that is inconsiderate.
And you wrap things up with the seventh principle being healthy trust must be control surrendered.
That is really speaking to the concept of codependency, which could be the seventh C in and of itself, because most of the people we work with are codependent. Codependency means I'm trying to manipulate the reactions and the presence of someone in my life. One of the ways to look at control being surrendered is if you're doing something for your spouse, what is your motivation for doing it? If it's fear and anxiety of what their reaction will be, that's codependency. If it's surrendered control, you're basically going to do stuff for them out of love and service, not expecting anything in return. So when you surrender control of your spouse, you're basically letting go of trying to manipulate their reactions. That's an incredibly important thing to build trust. In other words, the spouse will perceive he's not trying to fool me, deceive me, manipulate me, and control me. Maybe now I can start trusting him.
I think our listeners have probably now fully understood why we felt a second show to wrap up this relational dimension was necessary, because I think that's some very impactful information that you've shared with us today. Knowing that we have men's groups out there listening to the Men of Valor program, as we wrap up today's show, and I appreciate the knowledge that you have shared with us today, Mark. What thoughts or assignments would you like to leave them with as we wrap up the show?
Well, I think one of the main thoughts, we don't have time to get into all of the things they might think about, but if you look at any of these contracts, intentionality, if you look at any of the dynamics of trust building, there's going to be a lot of times when you doubt yourself, when you get impatient with yourself, when you get anxious and angry and so forth, when you might have problems with trust. We're talking to men's groups. And this is where accountability comes in. Accountability doesn't just come in with reminding the guys in your group about boundaries for sexuality or their commitments to be sober. It's also about encouragement to start doing some of the other healthy things we've been talking about, the patience, the serving. The accountability is also about not being a codependent. It's about intentionality. It's about if you want to start something, follow through with it. One of the principles of accountability is that we don't just stop things, but we also start things. And accountability means we have encouragement to stay started, as well as to stay stopped from the unhealthy stuff. So if you're listening out there, guys, all of us should have positive things that we're trying to work on, and also character qualities like patience that we're trying to work on. So help each other with those things.
We have a growing audience of women that we are learning, are listening to the show. What point can you leave them with?
Well, I hope the points about trust have been helpful to you. And what I'd like for you to understand is that forgiveness is a process and trust is a process, and that this may take months and years to develop. And I'm thinking of what Debbie, my wife, would say about this. One of the main journeys of trust building for the spouses is to learn how to trust yourself and your own intuitions and your own perceptions of things. And then also, as we would spiritually believe, your main goal is to trust God. So if you learn how to trust God, learn how to trust yourself, I think trust for others will flow out of those.
Thank you for joining us today on the Faithful and True podcast, featuring Dr. Mark Laaser. This episode was the Relational Dimension Part 2. We hope that this was a great episode for you to enjoy. We also want to invite you to visit our website, faithfulandtrue.com, where you'll find many useful and helpful resources for you. You'll find over 550 additional podcasts like this one, and we invite you to check those out. We also want you to see the online information and online registration for the 3-day intensive workshops. We have the Men's Journey Workshop, which we offer every month. We have the Women's Journey Workshop, which we offer on a quarterly basis. And then we have 2 different Couples Journey Workshops for you to check out as well. We invite you to do so. We appreciate your support and your giving of your time to hear these meaningful and helpful messages. Until we meet with you again, we hope that the coming week will be a week for you that's filled with many blessings and with great vision.